Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The White House Correspondents' Dinner was held over this weekend. For the second year in a row, the president didn't go. And for the second year in a row, you were glad you didn't go either. You've probably seen some of the tape. We've got Ed Henry, former president of the White House Correspondents Association, and Mark Stein up in just a minute to discuss what happened and what it means. But first, over the past month, a caravan of Central American migrants has gradually made its way up from Honduras through Mexico all the way to Tijuana, opposite San Diego. At one point, Mexican authorities claimed they broke up the group, and American media, of course, dutifully reported that they did. But they didn't. That was just a PR gesture, and a temporary one. In fact, during parts of the trip, Mexican police escorted the migrants northward. In other words, the Mexican government abetted illegal immigration into this country, as it has done for many years. Well, tonight the caravan is on our southern border. Rather than wait for the crossing station at San Ysidro to open, many of them just jumped the fence. Some waved Honduran flags when they got to the top. And that tells you everything. When you arrive in a country to contribute to it and to assimilate into its culture, you don't wave the flag of a foreign nation. That's when you do in triumph when you invade a country. According to Border Control, at least one member of the caravan has already admitted to being a member of MS-13. All of this should worry us. There are only a few hundred people in this caravan, but there are billions more around the world who live amid violence and poverty, and virtually every single one of them would like to relocate to San Diego. The left argues we have no moral right to stop any of them from doing that. Here's attorney Nicole Ramos of Tijuana denouncing the U.S. government as criminal for trying to enforce our own federal law. Watch.
The message for Customs and Border Protection: stop rejecting asylum seekers who try to present themselves at the port of entry. You know what you're doing. You know you turn people away. You complain that they are breaking the law by entering illegally. You are breaking the law, and you are forcing them to break the law. That's why we have caravans.
Yeah, that's definitely someone you want in control of our public policy, screaming into a bullhorn. This is not immigration. Immigration happens with the consent of the host country. This is happening by force, without our consent. A government that cared about its own citizens wouldn't allow it to happen. Bad things happen when you leave the door open. Every homeowner knows that. The left is demanding that we leave our door open. Any attempt at self-defense is immoral, they tell us, from the safety of their segregated neighborhoods where they all live. Illegal immigrants are amazing people, they say, far better than you are, Mr. Entitled American. Last week we had a conversation with Enrique Acevedo of Univision, and he made that point. If you're right up against a country that's totally out of control, as people are shooting each other in the numbers you just described, right, why wouldn't you be terrified to let them in?
Well, I think you're not getting the criminals. You're getting the best of Mexico. People who are willing to work 2 or 3 shifts a day, the people who are law-abiding citizens and are proactive enough to try to provide a better future for their family, the people who are fleeing that violence. That's what you're getting, not rapists and criminals like President Trump suggested.
But we don't know that, of course, because we have more than 10... No, actually we don't. Jorge Ramos also works as an anchor at Univision, which, unlike RT, has not been forced to register as a foreign agent. He also wrote the book Stranger, The Challenge of a Latino Immigrant in the Trump Era. We spoke with him just a minute ago. Jorge, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So the first and maybe most important question is, why should we let these asylum seekers, these migrants, into our country?
I think the United States is becoming a hostile, even dangerous country for refugees and for immigrants. And I think we have a long tradition of being generous, of accepting other immigrants from countries where they're fleeing violence and poverty and lack of democracy. I think that's precisely what the United States is. And at the end, Tucker, I think it's simply a matter of deciding what kind of country do we want to be. And it seems at this point that we're talking about only a few hundred refugees, and put it in context, from the 65 million refugees that there are in the world, the United States accepted only 84,000 in 2016, and with President Trump it's going to be even less. So it's simply a matter of deciding what kind of country do we want to be.
Well, we've accepted about 13 million refugees, economic refugees, who are in our country now illegally. But back up for 1 second. You said that this is a hostile, dangerous place for refugees. Then why would you want them to come here if the United States is so dangerous?
Well, I mean, that's much, much better than if you're a father in Tegucigalpa or San Pedro Sula and you have a son, and that son wants to be recruited by the by the gangs, or if they threaten your only daughter, they want to rape her, what would you do? I mean, maybe the only option for them is to come to the United States.
Oh, but it's not the only option.
I
mean, look, I understand. Look, I love this country. I was born here. I'm not a citizen of any other country. Obviously, I'm for America, and I plan to stay. So you don't need to convince me why people would want to come. I understand why they would.
Exactly.
But in order to get here, they pass through Mexico, which is, by many measures, a rich country. It's got the 15th largest economy in the world. There are 30 Mexican billionaires. Got a bigger economy than Saudi Arabia. They're sleeping on the street in Tijuana. Why doesn't the Mexican government help them?
Well, it's first of all, they don't want to stay in Mexico. They want to come to the United States. And second of all, if you're fleeing violence, if you're fleeing gangs in Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala, why would you want to go to Mexico when in the last 5 years more than 100,000 people were killed by drug violence? Would you stay in Mexico? Of course not. It doesn't make absolutely.
Well, no. I mean,
it doesn't make any sense. So they want to come to the United States.
Probably want to fly business class to Zurich and move to the Alps, but you know, I don't get to because it's not my country. So
you want to close the United States? That's what you want to do. You want to close the United States? I mean, that's the kind of country you want to be in.
I want to revert to what we were, which is a country of laws, where people can come here, but they do so legally. We have over 1 million people come here every year legally. They fill out the paperwork, they get in line from around the world, and I don't know why that system doesn't work. 1 million people a year is a lot.
And they want to come here legally. They want to come here legally. They're waiting in Tijuana. It's just that for 2 days they haven't been allowed even to talk to an agent.
They're not trying to get here legally. No, that's not true.
Side.
They're trying to come here and claim asylum, which in effect means a court date will be set and the overwhelming majority will not show up for court and they will blend in with the other 13 million illegals already
that's
here.
Not true. I mean, they're fleeing violence. They're fleeing gangs.
How do you know that? Wait, hold on. You keep making these statements. What do you know about them?
Because we talk to them, because we have reporters talking to them, because we know who they are. We talk in Spanish every single day with them. We've been following them for 25 days. That's why we know who they are. That's why we know that they're not criminals and terrorists and they're not rapists. That's why we know who they are.
Did you talk to the one who was a member of MS-13 who was caught last week, who admitted he was a member of MS-13? What did he say when you talked to him?
Well, I haven't talked to him, and again, if you want to criminalize the whole group simply because of one person, I don't even know what's your source.
But
if you want to criminalize everyone, you can do that.
Stop the word tsunami for 2 seconds.
That's not a kind of country I want to live in.
It's the Mexican citizen lecturing me about what kind of country America is. I love that. But let me ask you this. One of them said he was from MS-13. That was his description of his own affiliation. You're saying I'm criminalizing him by repeating what he said about himself. So maybe what you're really engaging in is propaganda, not fact-finding.
No. What I'm saying is that if you want to criminalize the whole caravan, which is not composed by bad hombres, and as you know, there's no invasion, if you want to criminalize the hundreds of them.
Oh, there's an invasion.
Of what
13 million people here illegally? I think that's an invasion. Look, if 13 million illegals showed up in Mexico tomorrow and wouldn't leave, and if people from other countries like you called anyone who wanted to make them leave a racist, I think you would call it what it is, which is an invasion.
No, what I'm simply saying is that if they're fleeing, if they're asking for political asylum, we have to listen to them. And on the other hand...
Why do we have to listen to them?
Well, because that's the long tradition that we've had, just to accept and protect those who are vulnerable, those who are being persecuted.
Well, why doesn't Mexico, why doesn't Mexico with an economy larger than Saudi Arabia's protect them? Okay, but hold on. Why is it America's unique obligation to take in, I mean, there are 1.2 billion people in Africa. All of them have lower standards of living than Americans. Many of them are living in violent places. Do they all have a right to come here? It's a real question. Do they?
Could it be because we are the most powerful and the richest country in the world, and we want to be an example of democracy and equality?
Right. Circa 1955. That would be China, which doesn't believe in diversity or immigration, just so you know.
Well,
do they have any obligation?
Because they are in our hemisphere, and we're also responsible for that. I mean, they're fleeing violence, right? So why do you think they're fleeing? These drug wars in Central America and Mexico are not happening just because it's a TV project. No, it's happening simply because there are more than 25 million Americans who use illegal drugs, and we're also responsible for everything that's happening in this hemisphere.
We're going to blame the junkies. So Mexico sends in fentanyl, heroin. Yes, it does. Mexico is now the largest manufacturer of crystal meth. We used to make it ourselves. Now they make it. They kill tens of thousands of Americans every year, and those families are the ones responsible.
U.S. citizens, 25 million U.S. citizens who are consumers of drugs. We're also responsible for that violence.
Oh, we're responsible for heroin addiction. So someone who's taking heroin, he's responsible. The junkie living on the street is responsible for these people being here. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that when you have about 25 million U.S. citizens who use illegal drugs, it has consequences in the whole hemisphere. Drugs are coming from Colombia and Peru, crossing Central America and Mexico, and the violence that's happening in those places is also partly responsible for the consumers in this country.
Oh, I understand. So 60,000 people die of drug ODs last year. Most of those drugs came from Mexico, but it's our fault. So not only do we have to drop our borders, ignore our own laws, take any poor person around the world who wants to come here, but we have to do it because we're immoral, because we're dying of drug ODs? That's the argument, really?
So you think that the U.S. and the U.S. consumers have absolutely no responsibility for the drug wars in Mexico, in Colombia, in Peru, and in Central America? They're completely linked. Absolutely, they're completely linked. And guess what? Not only that, how about the guns and the rifles being used by drug traffickers? Where do you think they get
It's funny. Typically, when you're trying to get someone to do something nice for you, like taking all your poor people?
So yes, there's responsibility, and we in the United States, we have responsibility for the things that are happening in our
You're a Mexican
hemisphere.
citizen. You voted the Mexican presidential election. I just find it amazing that you can demand compassion from Americans.
I'm also a U.S. citizen.
I guess, but you voted in the Mexican election, so I mean, it's not...
I voted in the Mexican election, and I voted in the U.S. election. I know it's confusing for you, but that's what happens. And there are millions of people around the world with dual citizenship. I'm just one of them.
Yeah, well, I'm opposed to it, if I can say that for obvious reasons. But it's just funny how we have a moral obligation because we're bad people to subsidize the rest of the world.
Because we're the richest and the most powerful country in the world, and many people want to come here, and we're an example of democracy and generosity. I think that's the right idea
Talk
for
about
America.
blaming the victim. Jorge, it was great to see you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mark Krikorian is Executive Director at the Center for Immigration Studies. He just returned from a trip to the border, and he joins us now. Mark, so you were just there. Would you say the border's secure from what you saw?
No, it's not. And the Border Patrol agents we talked to and the ranchers and others, none of them said it was particularly secure either. This is the southern tip of Texas is where we're at, which is ground zero now for immigration. It used to be Arizona. Before that, it was San Diego. Those places are better patrolled. Now it's South Texas. The Border Patrol told me in South Texas, they don't have a single permanent camera tower. These are these towers, remote control cameras up top. They have a few of them on like trailers or something.
Yes.
They don't have a single permanent infrastructure of these camera towers. They need all kinds of infrastructure. They need roads that go parallel to the border so they don't have to go out and around to chase people. They need all kinds of stuff. And this is the most important impacted area of the border now.
So let me ask you, there's a picture on the screen. You took that shot. It showed chicken wire fence. Is that right there?
Yeah, that's a smuggling trail under the fence.
Is that the border right there?
No, that's not the border. That's 70 miles in from the border, believe it or not, up around a checkpoint that the Border Patrol has. So the smugglers let people off before the checkpoint. They go around and they pick them up on the other side of the checkpoint.
What kind of effect would a border wall have on this part of Texas?
There's already some real fencing that's comparable to a wall anyway, but it's hard to do it there because the river is snakes around and around. So where do you put it? Wherever you put it, there are Americans on the other side of the wall. This isn't like Arizona. So it's much more difficult. It would help in certain areas, there's no question about it, but it's not a silver bullet down there.
Is it enforceable, the border?
Yeah, it's enforceable, sure. I mean, perfectly, can we seal it off perfectly? No, but it's definitely enforceable. Close to half the Border Patrol agents we have down there are doing non-patrol things that we should be having clerks or other people do. That's something the National Guard helps with, actually. They don't go out and arrest people. They help Border Patrol so that the guys with the badges and the guns can go and arrest people better. We can control that much better than we do now. One of the key things we also need, more detention space. Because when we arrest somebody from Central America, for instance, we can't just dump them back across the border. The Mexicans, plausibly enough, say, it's your problem. We're not taking them back. You need to hold on to them somehow, but until you can get them back. Congress turned down the administration's request for extra detention money, and so they end up having to do this catch and release thing. They give them a letter, show up for your immigration during 2 years from now, please, and then you never see them again. They call it a run letter.
Thankfully, Paul Ryan did fund border security projects around the world for other countries.
Sure.
So we're grateful for that. I know they're grateful.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The White House Correspondents' Dinner was held on Saturday night. Comedian Michelle Wolf delivered a monologue that many in the crowd, even those who hate Trump, which is almost everybody, thought was in poor taste. Here's part of it.
I actually really like Sarah. I think she's very resourceful. Like, she burns facts, and then she uses that ash to create a perfect smoky eye. Like, maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's lies. It's probably lies. And I'm never really sure what to call Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, is it Sarah Sanders? Is it Sarah Huckabee Sanders? What's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women? Oh, I know, Aunt Coulter.
Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry was, among many other things, including our friend, president of the White House Correspondents Association in 2012 and 2013. So he was in the position of running this dinner, hiring the entertainment, etc. You went on Saturday. What was your response?
I was appalled because, I mean, among other things, we invited Sarah Sanders to be our guest for dinner, essentially in our home. You know, this is our annual event. We being the correspondents. And she was insulted by this comedian. It went further than that. It was very personal. She seemed to be taking it very emotionally, in terms of these attacks. I mean, she was struggling to keep her composure, I think, Sarah Sanders. And she was consoled by a bunch of correspondents afterwards because it was so negative and so nasty. And it went beyond that. There were jokes about abortion. I kid you not. There was a joke along the lines of, don't knock it till you've tried it. And I saw people sort of gasping at that. And then this comedian said, yeah, knock it out, meaning the baby, knock it out. People literally had never heard anything like this at one of these dinners. And so, look, I get that there are bigger issues in the country, but given the fact that all the attention of this dinner, we should issue a simple apology that just says, this should not have happened to Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary. And I've been getting a lot of feedback from people around the country saying, who are anti-Trump, saying, why are you holding a comedian to a higher standard than the president? To which I say, I'm actually not. I agree that the president should be held to a higher standard. He's said some very outrageous and controversial things. There should be a higher standard, which is why we have elections. And he won the election. And if you disagree with him, if you vote him out, take him on.
But here's what the White House Correspondents Association can control: is the comedian who speaks
control that. It's
at
not
their
an election, not a national election. The president of the association picked it and picked somebody who's basically part of the resistance. And probably, we should figure it out that this kind of thing was going to happen because this comedian wanted to make her name, and here we are talking about it.
So you ran the association when Obama was president.
Yeah.
What would have happened to you personally and to the association if the comedian had attacked Obama?
I thought about this for many long hours, and I picked Conan O'Brien because I think he's very talented, but also because I knew that he had to face his audience on Monday. And remember when Michael Jordan said years ago that he wouldn't endorse a Democrat in a big Senate race against Jesse Helms because he said Republicans buy sneakers too? Yeah. Well, Conan O'Brien may lean left, but he knows that Republicans buy sneakers too, and Republicans watch late night TV. And before the Kimmels of the world and all of this anti-Trump business, someone like Conan O'Brien had to face his audience on Monday night and be fair. Take on the president, but be fair. And I thought if I picked somebody who got up there and did some of these kind of jokes we saw Saturday night and ripped President Obama in a very personal, negative way, Fox and the White House Correspondents Association would have paid a heavy price.
The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department would open an investigation. And I mean, let's be honest. Ed, thank you for that perspective. Mark Stein comes on right after the break to assess what just happened here in Washington on Saturday night. We'll be right back.
He's also very anti-choice. He thinks abortion is murder, which, first of all, don't knock it till you try it. And when you do try it, really knock it. You got to get that baby out of there.
The White House Correspondents' Dinner this Saturday, probably the worst crime against comedy since The Hangover Part 2, but it's not the only unfunny thing that happened. This month marks, by the way, the one-year anniversary of Kathy Griffin. Remember her? The single most unhappy person in America, posing with a severed head of Donald Trump. Well, today she went on The View, of course, and revoked her apology, assuming that's possible, for that, and then took additional shots. Here's part of what she said.
I can't believe it's been a year since this. It's a year this month that picture was released. Right. And we already described.
What a year it's been.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I take the apology back. son, Don Jr. and Eric, or as I called them, Eddie Munster and Date Rape.
She's a lot of fun. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight. So what are we looking, you have this remarkable ability to stand back and sort of see the big picture here. What are we looking at in these two appearances?
I think actually we are looking at the death of comedy. To go to that abortion joke, first of all, actually Ed Henry, insofar as it is a joke, Ed actually told it better than the so-called comedian did. It relies on a sort of word inversion. Don't try it till you knock it, but if you do try it, knock it out. Is that a joke that a professional joke writer should write? I mean, what's fascinating to me is it's offensive without... I quite like a lot of sharp, edgy, so-called dangerous comedy. But this stuff is offensive without actually being funny. If you look at what she was doing on Saturday night, Kellyanne Conway is a liar, and then Sarah Huckabee Sanders is also a liar. And if she'd had time for so-called jokes about Mattis and Pompeo and Sessions and the rest of the cabinet, they'd have all been liars too. And what's sad is that this is such defanged comedy. You were talking about the caravan a couple of minutes ago. I'd love to have jokes about the caravans, jokes about North Korea, jokes about President Macron. This is a smart, sophisticated Washington crowd in black tie, and they're listening to this woman using the F word, making a joke about how her private parts require a lot more yarn than those pink hats on the Trump parade. This is sophisticated wit for the smartest people in Washington. This is the death of comedy, because there's nothing the left can make honest jokes about except to mock Republicans as liars or uptight Christian fundamentalists hung up on abortion. Nothing else is left.
Well, I mean, it was funny in the same way that the New York Times op-ed page is funny. If by funny you mean sort of, you know, within the very narrow boundaries of what's acceptable. That's the point. You can't be funny if you can't say things.
No, but that's actually, the New York Times op-ed page is a very good example. I could never get over that when I first came to this country. There'd be 4 pieces on there. There'd be 3 dull, turgid, earnest pieces about the Bosnian War or whatever was going on at the time, and then in the corner there'd be some twee little ninny making coy, so-called humorous jokes about barcode scanners. If you're going to be a political comedian, if this is the funniest night of the year in political comedy, it requires you actually to make savage political comedy, not about Sarah Huckabee Sanders' makeup, but about serious things like North Korea and Iran and all the rest of it. It's so... I mean, what's so absurd about this stupid, hideous, dead occasion is that you book people who can't do anything but say the F word, and yet it's given the status of a sort of semi-state occasion that the president is somehow rejecting centuries of tradition if he doesn't show up for. Well, which is it? Is it a night of serious, sharp political comedy, or is it just, frankly, dull, turgid people mouthing off?
Well, that's right. And totally unwilling to slay a single sacred cow. If you're brave, I don't know, make a joke about something that'll offend people you live near. They would never.
Absolutely.
Mark Stein, thank you. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Well, over the weekend on MSNBC, which certainly you were watching, a guest explained that if Mike Pence were ever to become president, he would start sending gay people to concentration camps. Not jokingly, by the way. We'll get a response to that up next. If you're Joy Reid, you spend almost every day just soaking in the accolades from other journalists. You're brave, you're brilliant. But for the last week, life has not been that way for Joy Reid. She was attacked for comments on her old blog, long defunct, and on her old Twitter feed. She denied that she made those comments and instead created a ludicrous story about how the blog was hacked. She called the FBI in. NBC backed her up. It was all a lie. Well, this weekend, she went halfway toward admitting it was a lie. She sort of apologized for some of them. I take ownership, she said, and then took no ownership at all. And then she invited a guy on called Brandon Wolf. Now, the point of Brandon Wolf on Joy Reid's show was to make everything okay. And Wolf did this by explaining that, okay, maybe those comments were offensive, but they're nothing compared to Mike Pence. If Mike Pence ever became president, he'd put gay people in concentration camps. Watch this.
We have homophobic psychopaths running the United States government today. That's the reality. We have a Secretary of State, as was mentioned, that believes that gay people are sinners based on who they are. If Mike Pence, God bless him, ended up in the White House sitting behind that desk in the Oval Office, he would have us all in concentration camps hoping to pray away the gay.
So Chad McMoore lives in Brooklyn. He spent years writing for Out and The Advocate. He no longer does. Instead, he joins us tonight. So you've been in this world journalism, been on gay politics a lot for a long, long time, and you watch something like this over the weekend, and your reaction is what?
It's almost become a point of kind of a depraved fantasy on their part. They actually believe this could happen, that Mike Pence wants to do this. He's sort of using the exact same script as that bedazzled figure skater during the Olympics, Adam Rippon or what have you, going after Vice President Pence because they're really searching for homophobic monsters in the administration, and the best thing they can come up with is Mike Pence, who has to suffer through. I feel very bad for Mike Pence. He handles these attacks with such grace and such decorum. I really don't think that there's anything homophobic about Mike Pence. They don't even know why they hate him. They don't even know what these Pray the Gay Away camps, that argument was about. It was a complete fantasy. He never, it's almost something 20 years old that was he supported therapy for people who want to change their sexual behavior. It had nothing to do with gay people specifically. Yet they've latched on to this, and Mike Pence has become their go-to scary boogeyman.
But did he call for concentration camps and I missed it? I mean,
not that I'm aware of.
All made up? Okay.
I think it's all. I believe it's all made up. And you know, unfortunately, they want to believe he's capped in electroshock therapy, and that one's not true either. Unfortunately, they just can't. They can't come to terms with the fact that people really don't care about homosexuality anymore in this country. It's very rich, also coming from Brandon Wolf, who's a Pulse nightclub survivor, right? Pulse nightclub was not attacked by the radical Amish. The person who attacked Pulse nightclub did not pledge his allegiance to the Episcopalian Caliphate. And there is a very real problem. There is a group of people in this world that wants to harm gay people, and it's not Christians.
Well, who is it? Tell me. Now I'm intrigued.
I believe it's this political movement called Islamofascism. I think that what it might be. I think Omar Mateen may have been a Muslim, but I'm not entirely sure. We should ask Brandon how he thinks about that.
So if there was a group of people, heavily armed, well-organized people who sought to kill you, you'd probably want to name them and oppose them. Why wouldn't Brandon Wolf be doing that?
I don't know. It's almost like it doesn't fit in with the leftist narrative, so you kind of have to be lockstep. It's very rich that Joy
Reid... Well, wait, so whose behalf is he working on?
I wouldn't know. I think he's just working on behalf of MSNBC and the Democratic Party. I'm not sure it has much to do with gay people. I don't know.
Oh, so he's not actually a civil rights activist. He's a political hack who will say anything to get his candidates elected. Is that what you're saying?
I think that may be it. I think you might be onto something there. It's shocking, I realize. It's incredibly shocking. But that might be what's happening here. Yeah.
Thank you, Chadwick. I knew you would explain it. Because I was watching this, I was thinking, really? Concentration camps? You know, I don't know. I can't catch all the news. But I appreciate your clearing that up.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you. President Trump took another shot at NFL players who kneeled for the national anthem. Did the NFL hear it? What is their view on that these days, by the way? The latest with Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports coming up.
We defend our flag. And we honor our flag. And if others honored our flag, they'd be a lot better off, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they be a lot better off?
That was President Trump at a rally over the weekend in Michigan. He wasn't mentioned by name, but that was probably quarterback Colin Kaepernick he was talking about. Kaepernick has not been signed to a team since 2016 when he began kneeling during the national anthem and started a league-wide trend. Recently, the New York Times got a hold of a recording of NFL owners and players talking about the kneeling crisis last year. The conversation has lots of talk about damage control and none at all about the core issue. Well, Dave Portnoy is known to millions as El Presidente, not the president of a country, but instead of a mindset. He is founder of Barstool Sports, of course, and he joins us tonight. Dave, I wanted to ask you about this because you're one of the few people whose judgment on this I trust. So Colin Kaepernick has not been re-signed. Do you think in an utter meritocracy, he would be playing or no?
Yeah, oh, yeah, he would, totally.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think he is good enough to play. If I was an owner, I wouldn't sign him personally, not because I care whether he kneels or he doesn't, but if you're an owner, why would you want this headache? I mean, that's how they look at it.
Right.
It's just going to bring controversy. So is he good enough to play? Absolutely. But the owners don't want to. They don't. Owners want no headache. So why take the headache?
Wait, you saw the piece on the 3-hour meeting that the owners had with the selected players. And in my reading of it, the owners sounded like they were living in a different country. They didn't seem to fully understand the forces at work here. Is that a fair take, do you think? Do they know what's going on?
I don't think they totally knew what's going on, but it just goes to the other point. And to a degree, I think they do. They just know there's a controversy around it. And the owners are very conservative, and they're on a money train. I think the ideal world for an owner would be another owner sign him. I think that's honestly what they like, but none of the owners want to be the guy to sign up. They all want to point the finger. Hey, why don't you bite the bullet? Why don't you bite the bullet? Because it's good for the NFL, I think, overall, if they put this issue behind them, but nobody wants it to be in their backyard.
Right. So these are not necessarily moral leaders. They're businessmen who want the franchise to continue throwing off huge amounts of cash.
Is anybody thinking the owners care about anything but making money? They absolutely do not. Any insight in that they care about the moral issues or whether it's right, wrong, how people feel, they do not. They absolutely care about the bottom line, the money, and what it means to the football. That is the clearest thing the NFL has ever done, and you see it with this issue. You see it with every issue that basically comes up in the hypocrisy of every decision they make. It's all based on money, and Roger Goodell is the leader in basically licking his finger, putting it in the air, and seeing which way the wind of public opinion is blowing and how he thinks it affects the bottom line.
Yeah, I've noticed. So I wanted to get your take on this since you run Barstool, which I think has some of the most sensible people in America reading it. And so as a reality check, there's a student at the University of Utah who's created something called a crying closet. And the idea is that college is so stressful that kids need a place to go to weep in private. This is apparently flourishing on that college campus. Do you think that your readers would use a crying closet if they had a chance to use it?
I do not. Unfortunately, this story is the least surprising story of all time. College kids are babies. That's well known. And we should say it's the minority. I bet most normal thinking people are like, what is going on here? But these stories get sensationalized, and then you get basically rewarded for it. It's the everyone gets a trophy generation, basically.
But I mean, do you think we're told constantly that there's nothing wrong with an adult man crying in public and that you should be proud to express your emotions, and yet a lot of people kind of feel like, well, actually there is something kind of embarrassing about weeping over exams or something in public. Do you think we should be embarrassed?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if you there's certain reasons to cry. I mean, if there's a death in the family, I certainly will not make fun. But if you're crying over an exam or crying because you stubbed your toe or something little, I think that's embarrassing. It's the same reason when somebody falls in public, you scramble up. It's human nature. I do think there's something embarrassing to it. Yeah, I do.
So let me ask you one last question. So a country that encourages college students to cry in crying closets is not a country that's going to produce a lot of competitive NHL players. So do you think maybe one of the reasons that so many people in the NHL are from Canada or Eastern Europe is that we're not tough enough to play the game?
That is a wild leap. No, I just think that hockey. I just think hockey is probably national sport in Canada. And again, this is the minority. And in a weird way, that you want a wild leap in logic. The thing we run into is the minority, the vocal minority, make a lot of noise, and it's almost like the Facebook thing that just happened. So many people, it's such a big story, but then the earnings came out. Most normal people don't care. There's such an outcry for things from, again, the vocal minority that things like the crime closet, most people aren't using that. It's just the people who use it, like social media, you hear about it, and then guys like me and you make fun of it, and we should actually throw the people crying and lock the door and leave them in the closet. It's like proverbial sticking a kid in a locker in middle school. That's what the people in those lockers will do. Put them in there, let them cry, and lock the door, and don't let them out.
The swirly solution. I love it. Well, that's why I like having you on, because you are a well-needed ray of reality into the dark insanity of my world. Dave, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Jim Comey says the House Intel Committee's investigation into Russia was too political and the rest of us should ignore it. Huh. We'll talk to the chairman of that committee right after the break. Fired FBI Director Jim Comey, still selling his book, was on Meet the Press over the weekend. On the show, Comey said he was not impressed with the House's Russia investigation because their work is too political, he said. Watch.
I think the most important piece of work is the one the special counsel is doing now. This strikes me as a political document.
Did the House Intelligence Committee at all serve a good investigative purpose during all this, in your observations?
Not that I can see.
Just totally got too politicized?
Yeah, and it wrecked the committee, and it damaged relationships with the FISA court, the intelligence communities. It was just a wreck.
What an oily, false character he is. It's obvious. Of course, this political document would contrast completely with the work of the special counsel investigation that initially employed Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Congressman Devin Nunes is the chairman of the House Intel Committee, and he joins us tonight from California. So what exactly, if we can sort of work our way through the cant here, what is the core charge against this report? You said the president did not collude with Russia, to the best of your knowledge. The counter-argument is what?
Well, it's hard to keep a straight face through that interview. First of all, it's softball after softball. It's not a real interview. But most importantly, Mr. Comey probably never read our report, and likely because the Department of Justice and the FBI redacted so much of it that if you go online and try to read our report, you will see that much of it you can't even read. So
yeah, I noticed.
He doesn't know what we have. We've been trying to get Department of Justice and the intelligence agencies to unredact all of ours so that the American people can actually see the work product that we created. I think the most alarming thing is that Mr. Comey continues to say that he did not tell us things that clearly he said on the record to us, like the fact that Mr. Flynn, the agents that interviewed Mr. Flynn, did not believe that he lied. And we want the American people to see Mr. Comey's statement. And we can't get that to them until our report is actually allowed to be out for the American public to see, and they unredact it all.
So you're in charge of oversight of the intel world. What did you make of a statement that former CIA Director Brennan made on Friday when he appeared to threaten the president over the Mueller investigation and said, basically, wait till you see what Mueller has on Trump? How would the former CIA director have advanced knowledge of that? How would he know anything more than I know as a private citizen? What is that?
Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have another problem because they've been hiding additional information from us. So we've interviewed almost all of the people involved in this. I think 75 people we've interviewed. We found no evidence whatsoever of any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. As I've said multiple times before, we did find very clear links between the Russians and the Democratic Party. And so the people that essentially say that Trump has done this and then accuse some of us of being conspiracy theorists, they're the ones we refuse to believe their conspiracy because we have no evidence of it, and then they deny the fact that they're the ones that paid to get information from the Russians. So I think Mueller should be investigating them.
Really quickly, just as an American, if you found evidence that the President of the United States or his campaign colluded with a hostile foreign power, would you cover it up?
No. Matter of fact, I've said that from the beginning. I said I'll be the first one to go out there and tell the American public, look, we have clear links between the Trump campaign and the Russians. But Tucker, I'll just repeat again, we have clear links between the Democratic Party and the Hillary campaign and the Russians, and nobody reports that.
Well, I haven't seen that on CNN, so I'm going to have to run it by fact checkers.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman,
don't count on that.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
California tells us it is the future of America. If that's true, then what does it mean the state has drug addicts shooting heroin in its subway stations and no one's doing anything about it? We've got video. It's disturbing. We'll be right back.